Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Ask the Once and Future Nerd for Book 2, Chapter 8 already, A Change of Scenery. I'm Zach, joined as always by Christian. Hey,
Hey
Christian.
everybody. Hello.
Um, we may or may not have some other guests joining shortly, but for now we are going to get started and do the podcast with the two of us. So welcome everyone. We're discussing A Change of Scenery, which is Book 2, Chapter 8. I'm going to give my usual announcement, which is if this is your first time listening to the Once and Future Nerd, welcome. We're very happy to have you. This is going to be the most spoilery of spoilery episodes, so I would recommend starting perhaps somewhere else. I'll also say a quick hello to our fans joining us on the live stream on YouTube. We do these Q&A episodes live on YouTube at the end of each chapter. If you're listening on the podcast feed, it's too late to join this one, but you can join us for the next one, for the next chapter. Welcome. Christian, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk about this chapter. This was a pretty cool chapter. Would you like to get right into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this chapter, it starts with sort of the resolution of the deal that Regan had made with Red Wren the pirate and drops off the party and then sees the party transporting towards the west. So A Change of Scenery is an aptly named title. And much of the interest in this chapter is what's happening sort of on that transit across the mountains from both our main party as well as, and perhaps even more so, from our secondary party containing Maguire and Traft and Arden the Annihilator. And the most exciting part of this chapter, as is evidenced by the artwork that those on the YouTube can see on the stream right now by our excellent artist John Flanagan, is the introduction of the dragon. Christian, what do you want to say about the dragon?
I think we've been asked about dragons since we hinted that dragons exist in like book 1, chapter 1. And we just needed to kind of find the right time to introduce a dragon. So we obviously, this was set up a little bit in the last chapter. We knew that, or was it? I think at some point episode 1 was I don't know. Anyway, we planned to have this dragon for a while, and this felt like the right time to bring it to finally introduce them. And I think they're a really, really cool, interesting character that we had a lot of fun writing.
Yeah, you say we've had this in mind for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, the very first day you and I sat down over those wings to start sketching out maps, I think we were already planning out what the dragons would be like.
Yeah.
So this has been a long time in the making, and I'm excited that we're finally here. I was excited we got to do a lot of sort of going back to the lore and the world building, which is always my favorite part, when we were crafting what their personality would be like, their traits, what they're interested in. So I thought that was a pretty cool experience. And I think it's a pretty neat thing. We get to experience that the way that the dragons sort of interact with time is very different from the ways that humans interact with time. And even Maguire, who is ageless in a way as a undead reliving being, still cannot experience time even remotely the same way as the dragon, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I think, and having my interest in philosophy in the past, like one of the questions that comes up a lot in philosophy that I think is interesting is like, persons, like, some sort of sentient being that has an inner life but interacts with the world in a very, very different way than we do, and what that being's inner life is like. Like, there's a famous philosophy essay called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" That's about this. So I think it's kind of cool to have this this creature that is a person, but it has a very different material experience of the world than humans do, or even than elves do.
Yeah, it's been really. I think we've had fun crafting this idea, and we spent some really fun conversations, sort of arguing back and forth about, well, if the dragons see group culture in this way, what does that mean about the fact this dragon is solitary? How are they, you know, how is this dragon in particular understanding their solitude in the context of the time frame of a dragon and so forth. So I don't know if we want to go into some of this lore stuff now, Christian, or if we want to hold it back for another time.
We can do a little bit. I don't want to spend the whole time just on the one question, but yeah, let's get into it a bit.
Sure. So I think one of the things that we were discussing in the background scenes, or behind the scenes, that's the word for it, is that these dragons are not by nature solitary creatures, but the time frame that we've all experienced in the story so far is a drop in the bucket to this dragon, such that it doesn't think of itself as a solitary creature, despite having been in this one cave isolated for many centuries by the context of the humans living there. So I found that super interesting. That may be me personally nerding out a little bit, but I found that interesting. And so in this chapter, we got to see the beginning of some negotiation, some discussion between Maguire, who already experiences time differently from the living humans, along with the dragon, who's on the whole different time scale. And so I think that set us up for some really exciting things moving forwards.
Yeah, I think they're a fun duo. I think when there's these interactions that are kind of like a little bit discretionary in terms of like, are we going to delve into this interaction? That when the personalities line up in a way that is interesting to me, that's when I love to explore something. And I'm actually I'm not saying everything I want to say because I've genuinely forgotten which scenes are in which chapter, because we're doing post on chapter 9 right now. But I think they're a fun pair, and I think you guys are gonna like what keeps happening with the dragon.
Yeah, and now I'm going to have to go double check after this recording. We might be cutting out a big chunk of this for the audio of the podcast feed if I already spoiled too much accidentally. This does lead us to a question off of our Discord channel. We got a bunch of great questions off of our Discord, and if anyone would like to join the Discord, you can look on our website. There should be a link to join the fully fan-made, fan-run Discord. Christian and I pop in occasionally, but it's mostly awesome fan discussion. But Sen on the Discord asked, what is our favorite dragon myth or folklore? Christian, do you have any inspirations for the dragon here? Any of your favorite stories?
Yeah, so something that I was like, I wanted the dragon to be somewhat grounded, they're like the magic is in how long they can live, but their actual biological processes kind of make sense science-wise. So kind of in my head, and there's a question on YouTube chat right now about whether the dragon is feathered. Yes, dragons are feathered in our in our universe, because I think my idea was like there was not a cataclysm that extincted dinosaurs in Jordan, and so this is just like this very, very old reptile had a chance to like keep getting bigger and develop intelligence, hence the feathers. So that's something that interests me, that kind of concept of dragons. And the other thing that I think is really cool is I read somewhere that like for a while we didn't know how spiders were able to eat other bugs because their their fangs are made of chitin and bugs are made of chitin. So like, how do the fangs, like, how do they eat through chitin with their fangs? And it turns out that spiders kind of absorb the very trace amounts of metals that are just like present in the world, and those kind of end up getting funneled by some process I don't understand into the end of their fangs, and that's how they're able to puncture chitin. And I don't know whether I don't know whether I thought of this or I saw a Tumblr post a million years ago that stuck with me, but an idea of like, it's usually part of European dragon lore that they hoard treasure. And so the idea that it's like, oh no, they actually have to eat a lot of metal in order, and it like goes to like their armor plating and to their teeth, and that's an important part of why they're as strong as they are.
Yeah. I just want to throw in quickly, I apologize to the live chat. I had the wrong tab open, so now I can see the live chat as well. And shout out to the live chat. I'm happy to see all of you here. So the chat is discussing what you were mentioning about the lack of the extinction of what we would think of as dinosaurs and how that influences the world building. And that's exactly what we were excited about. So we're happy you all are excited, engaging with that idea as well. And it's sort of as we've seen in our world, which I think is sort of an interesting twist, there's not dinosaurs roaming around everywhere. We have gone through all those, the stages of evolutions and different species rising and falling, but the dragons did go through that evolution and become a whole species, obviously very intelligent, very intentional species, so to speak, and they're the ones who sort of remain from that era.
Yeah, I think there's probably something to be said, partially to get us out of the problem that is being correctly identified on chat of like, how would intelligent primates have ever evolved if there were dinosaurs around. I think there's something to be said for like some shit with the atmosphere where it's just very hard to support like really, really, really big land animals, and dragons have some particular quirk that was like, okay, this is the species that, like, this is the version of big reptiles that made it. Probably because they have a structure, they have a bunch of like air bladders that they use for the fire breathing, so it's probably got something to do with that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I do think that it also, the social aspects do play some part of it, because I think, and Christian, you could tell me if I'm wrong, by the time the humans as, evolved primates are around, there aren't so many of the large non-sentient dinosaur species left.
Right.
So it's almost more like, the sentient species of dragons sort of encounter an alien species almost, so to speak, that they, on their timescale, get to see evolve into where they are.
Yeah.
The chat is discussing a dragon convergently evolved with a penguin. This is a very funny image. I'm not sure if there are any penguin dragons in our world, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out eventually.
We also received a Discord question from Agonizer. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, but
Agonizer, maybe?
Agonizer, that sounds right. What is the power level of dragons versus mages? And I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know that. Well, I guess we haven't seen yet in the story whether the dragons are accessing magic in the same way that Jen is, for example.
Right.
We've sort of set out that the as Christian was mentioning, there's a very like biological and chemical reaction to the flying aspect with those air bladders, and the fire breathing aspect, and the consuming the metal and so forth. So it's not necessarily just a raw magic. I think it will be interesting to explore and discover how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that a dragon could probably like kick most asses that it wanted to, because aside from its just like sheer biological strength and natural armor, they're as I understand them, they are at least as intelligent as humans, if not more. So there's no reason that they couldn't also do magic.
That is true. They are likely more so intelligent than humans, I would say.
Yeah, you don't want to get on a dragon's bad side, I think.
Yeah. I think we've very very thoroughly discussed the dragon aspect of this chapter. The chat is asking, I wonder if sapient mammals are to dragons what finches are to humans, whether it's just like, ooh, watch that go.
Yeah.
And I would say this is starting to get to slightly on the spoilery territories, but this is a question that we will start to discuss, and I'm very excited to discuss it.
Yeah.
But that is an excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. Otherwise in this chapter, one of the things that I'm excited for is we're starting to, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but the main party is moving west of the mountains as well. We get what I think is a very funny moment where the Nelson references the Mines of Moria, and we're sort of all prepped for all this, bad stuff to happen in the trip, and they just get there. This is one of the subtle humors that I really enjoy.
They almost, is this that chapter? Yes.
Yeah.
They almost have an exact Mines of Moria moment where Billy knocks a suit of armor down the well. And the only reason that they're not totally screwed is because the dragon he happens to awaken is A, busy, and B, doesn't eat sentient creatures anymore.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was as obvious as intended in the episode, but the way we envisioned these were happening like simultaneously and like less than a mile apart from each other. Our party like barely by the skin of their teeth missed Maguire and the dragons interactions going on there. I think there was one moment in this one where, just like Mines of Moria, Billy knocks over some coat of arms and it clatters down, but then all's well, which I think is hilarious. The YouTube chat, just to follow up, they are mentioning that beavers incorporate iron into their teeth, which is pretty awesome. They're also discussing another episode of this chapter, which was Renault and Jethro meeting up, which I think is also quite fun in a very creepy and ick-inducing way.
Yeah.
I both Jethro and Renault are very interesting to me, as I'm the lore and magic nerd, and that gives us a chance to really play around with what the magic allows. So I'm very excited about that, and we'll see where that goes.
Yep.
So the chapter, as we were discussing, there's this convergence where we've got the main party just passing by Maguire under the mountains, and then at the same time we're all moving physically closer to the town of Three Bridges, where First Snow is hanging out. And we did see some movement in this chapter where First Snow addressed the Federation Council. It didn't quite go her way. Christian, do you have anything you want to mention about that?
No, I mean, I think it's, I don't want to get too spoilery, but I think it's like pretty clear the chess pieces we're moving into place, and I really love First Snow and Steady River as characters, and both great performers, April and Aaron, who are criminally underused up until now, and so I'm very excited for getting to spend some more time with them in future chapters.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Chad agrees. Chad is very happy with First Snow and is excited for the convergence. I'm excited for the convergence also. It's been the way that the pacing of our show goes, it always feels like everything takes a little while to get there, but in real, like in showtime, not that much time has passed. It's just, right. In the audio medium, it takes a while to include this all.
Yeah, and particularly our production cycle. But this comes up literally every Q&A, I feel like, of like, yeah, it's been like a month and a half in plot time, which makes the show now a period piece because it started in like 2012.
Chad is also bringing up in particular the interactions between Nelson and First Snow. And I honestly haven't even thought about that yet, but that is going to be a lot of fun. I think their character interactions will be very interesting.
Yeah.
Which I think brings us kind of naturally to the next set of questions we received on the Discord from Sen and from Peekaboo, which was about the new outro music, which is also something we've been sort of sitting on and working on for a while, and we're very excited about. So, Christian, do you want to talk for a bit about this?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, so we knew we were, headed to quote-unquote the West for a while. And I am a sucker for spaghetti westerns. If you don't know what a spaghetti western was, it was westerns. They're mostly made in like the 60s. They were made in Italy and Spain by Italian filmmakers, which is part of why they're called spaghetti westerns, and also because for their time they were incredibly bloody but also very cheap, and so it's kind of a joke that like the blood looks like spaghetti sauce because it does. But these were kind of the first movies that I saw that was like, oh, this has a really distinct visual style that I am in love with. And my favorite film composer of all time is Ennio Morricone, who I think he passed away a couple years ago. And he's one of those composers who you know his work even if you don't know his work, because among a huge body of work, he did compose the score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which if you've ever heard he wrote that. He has a huge body of work. He's mostly famous for spaghetti westerns, but he's done he did The Untouchables, he did The Thing, a lot of stuff, and I was always kind of in awe of, he makes these arranging choices that have no right to work nearly as well as they do. For example, as far as I know, he was the first one to kind of use like a twangy electric guitar in a Western score, like that, classic Telecaster sound, which doesn't make sense when why would you have an electric instrument in a film set before electricity? But now when you hear that sound, it sounds like a Western because his work is so ubiquitous. And so I love just the textures and the arrangement choices of his scores. So when way back when we knew that we were going to head in this direction, I said, I think it would be cool to do a Western version of our theme song. So I went to Tom Lee, who is our main music director and composed our main theme, and said, hey, this is what I have in mind. I sent him a playlist of Ennio Morricone. It's like, do you want to rearrange our main theme in this style? And not only did he rearrange it, but he basically recorded the whole thing almost entirely. He sent it kind of as a demo, but it was a demo with all the stems of every instrument, and it was a combination of every instrument that he could play, he played. So all the guitars are him. I think the whistling and the bamboo flute are him actually playing. The rest are MIDI, and then we were feeling like the MIDI trumpet was a little too perfect and computer sounding. So our very own Zach Glass went and recorded an actual trumpet part, which I think makes the whole thing sound a lot more human and is great. And it's actually in the final mix, you're hearing Zach's real trumpet layered with the MIDI trumpet, because the humanness of Zach's track was better, but the MIDI trumpet added a lot of brightness that really cut through the mix. So then I took all of Tom's stems. I took Zach's trumpet part, and I did like kind of my own mix of it. I threw in some effects to make it sound like a crappy '60s movie soundtrack. I think it's really rad, and I'm excited to get to use it some more. Let's see. I don't know. Should I play the choral stem, or should we talk about something else first?
Yeah, let's set it up for a second, just so we have the context. I also want to say, as far as I know, I think my trumpet playing in that outro is my first appearance in a main plot episode.
I think that is right. You also played trumpet on the studio version of Singing Sister, so may have...
I don't think that made it into the main plot. I think that was just the studio version.
Yeah, we may have used it as background at some point, but I'm not sure.
Oh, that may be true. But yeah, everything you said, Tom is incredibly talented. I just wanted to mention what you said about the electric guitar in a Western. I'm not as connected to film as you are, but my mom watched a lot of TV Westerns when I was younger, and I always think of that guitar. That's just the sound that I expect to hear, and it never occurred to me that that's weird, but...
Right, exactly. It's like, it is weird, but it's not, because you're so used to it.
Yeah. So as Christian mentioned, Tom recorded all of these parts on his own, layered them all. Well, Christian did the layering, but one of the things that Tom recorded was a choral part that's all himself recorded and dubbed over itself, and it just sounds so fun on its own. So if the tech works right, Christian, would you like to...
Yeah, I'm gonna play that, and I'll give even a little more back. Like, this was such a great insight by Tom to pick up in Ennio Morricone's scores, because he would use vocals, but not in a normal way. Like, there's a part in the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme where it's clearly a guy yelling, trying to sound like a coyote. Like, it doesn't sound like a coyote. It sounds like a guy yelling like a coyote. And reportedly, like, when Ennio Morricone would do concerts, there would be a guy who's just, like, sitting there with all, like, the violin players and the bells players, you know, sitting there in his tuxedo, no instrument, and when the time came, he would just stand up and go, ah! Which I love. And so Tom is like, oh, let me just really use vocals in kind of avant-garde ways. So this is Tom recording 4-part harmony and layering each of the parts 3 times and then smushed together. I just think that rules.
That chord at the end is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will also say, I was very excited to get to play trumpet on this. I haven't seriously played trumpet in many years, so I was sitting downstairs in my basement looping this, 30-second bit of trumpet for hours and hours and hours. Uh-huh. I had a lot of fun with it. I also got it was also in my basement, which contributed to some of the sound not being as bright as we were hoping, and I apologize for that. But I think I recorded something like 100 takes through it and sent Christian a few of them. And actually, Christian, I don't even know this, did you pick the one take that I sent you, or did you layer a couple of me over it?
I think I comped together maybe 2 or 3. I think maybe I liked the intro better from one take and the outro better from another take, so I think I just spliced those together.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounded like to me. Chad is talking about how the ha and the ho from that track sounded like Skyrim vibes, and I could see that.
Yeah. But when you hear it, when you hear it with the mix, and there's also like a whip in there, it's just... Let's see. It's not super loud in the mix, but it's there with the whip. which I also love. And something else I want to call attention to here.
Oh, was that the whip?
There's right there. I really wanted to preserve that from Tom's demo when I remixed it, but there's this like, I don't even know how to describe it. There's this like spike in the higher frequencies when he hits the acoustic guitar chords really hard, which to my ear is reminiscent of either like spurs jingling or a revolver loading. And I think that's like, I mean, it's perfect for a Western, and it wasn't like a sound effect. It was just the instrument happened to sound that way, which I really, really love.
Yeah. One thing I want to shout out also about this theme music on the Discord, it was also pointed out that a podcast called The Amelia Project often does this sort of style variations on their theme. I have to say, I personally have not listened to The Amelia Project, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, same.
So in this case, this was not our specific inspiration, but I do kind of love that they do that in concept, and I had a lot of fun with us doing this. I don't know if I can say we're going to do many more of these. This just happened to fit so well with what was happening in the plot at the moment. It was very plot driven, our decision to do this. The chat is asking if we have cowboys, does gunpowder exist in the world?
Yeah, explicitly, yes. There aren't firearms, but there is. Regan has referred to it as thunder dust a few times, and I think the idea is like it's a very, very early gunpowder, like, you know, the earliest formulations of it, but no firearms, because actually, like, until you have like rifling and, you know, machining and replaceable parts and stuff, a repeating crossbow is probably going to be more effective than like a really, really, really good advanced crossbow is probably going to be more effective than a very early firearm.
Yeah, but I think Regan either had or bluffed having Thunderdust in a very early episode, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, it's an accessible thing. Like, I believe she uses it to, like, you know, just blow stuff up, which is also her kink. That is part of canon.
100%. So moving on from the theme song, which as much as I hate to move on from it, because both Christian and I had a ton of fun with it.
Yeah.
One thing that I forgot to bring up from the episode, which we have to touch on, and thank you to the live chat for reminding me of this, is in this chapter, we do see Ardell Redmore get captured by pirates, which is just a very, very happy, cathartic moment, I think.
Yeah.
I think that we set it up as a reminder for those listening that Ardell ended up trying to stow away on the boat of the same captain who our party had just recently stowed away from, and ended up getting caught by Ren in exactly the same way that our party had gotten caught by, and it was very funny to me. I really enjoyed that.
I do feel for Otto Olafsson. This one was really not his fault.
I was scrolling back through the script, and I believe this chapter was where we had Ardell trying to barter with someone with a donkey, and he was trying to barter with that ass, which was a very cheap joke that we wrote.
Stupid joke. Sometimes you write something and it's like, oh my god, I'm better than this, but no, I'm not. There's one in 9. Boy, oh boy, it is so thoroughly in the category of I'm better than this. Wait, no, I'm not.
Do you want to spoil it, or we'll wait for it?
Well, it's worth waiting.
It is worth waiting. But I did just want to mention, it is, unfortunately, we do see Renaud and Jethro sort of melding their powers and sort of rising up in power, but we balance that out with a healthy dose of comeuppance to Ardell, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah.
I believe there was something else in the chat that I wanted to call out. I'm just scrolling back for a moment. They were discussing Billy and Jen's magic development, as well as Nelson finally getting to delve into his dreams. I'm also excited for Nelson to delve into his dreams. This is, something that we've been sort of building towards very slowly as well, and I'm very excited about that. Is there anything else that, Christian, you can think of that we were intending to discuss?
No, I'm getting absolutely roasted within an inch of my life on chat, which is fine. Was that our list of questions?
That let me double check. There was one fun and a little silly question about how many elves does it take to change a light bulb, which I don't even know if it's worth diving deep into that. But how many elves does it take to change a light bulb?
I think we should aspire to have a good punchline for that by the next Ask
That's fair.
episode. I think that should be the goal. There is that bit, I think is the beginning of 7, where Jen is trying to like hold Regan's attention, and she starts a joke, and she's just like, yeah, I don't know why I thought I was just going to come up with a punchline on the spot.
Yeah. The chat is pointing out something that, Christian, I don't know if you actively thought about, but I had forgotten about, that the Ardell is now captured by the same pirates for whom Arlene had improvised that Maddie Grove song.
That was explicitly on my mind.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad that was on your mind, but
yeah.
That is exciting to see. Chad is talking about how they hope terrible, terrible things happen to Ardell, and don't worry, we do too. In our world, the bad folks don't always get their comeuppance, but this was one time where we knew that Ardell needed to get his comeuppance, but good, and we as the listeners need to experience that comeuppance in the most thorough way possible.
Yes.
So I believe that's it for the questions we had prepared. If the live chat has anything else they want to be asking or discussing, please feel free to chime in, and we will extemporize on the moment. While you're thinking of questions, there is one thing that Christian wanted to bring up briefly going into Chapter 9. So
yeah, it could turn into a bit of an elephant in the room if I don't. So, yeah, I mean, it's not so much of a spoiler to say that we're going into this kind of like Western arc. And, for I think a lot of you probably also listen to the Adventure Zone. They just finished up a Western arc. That alone would be fine, except that in that Taz arc, Erika Ishii played a tavern owner named Lulu, which was short for Louise. And it just so happens that you're also going to meet in our show a tavern owner named Lulu, which is short for Louise. This is one of the downsides of our production cycle. We had the script long before Taz came out. We love Taz, but this wasn't us trying to rip them off. It's just, for whatever reason, me and Erika Ishii both think that Lulu is just a tavern owner name. And yeah, if I were going to write a character that were explicitly inspired by somebody else, I would be a little more subtle about it. Like, for instance, if I were going to write a character based on the 60s character actor Lee Van Cleef, I wouldn't call him Lee Van Cleef. I would call him, say, Les Vanderberg or something.
Who would do something like that?
Right.
Or perhaps a character inspired by Bruce Springsteen who becomes Bryce Riverfell instead.
Yeah.
So just a slight degree of abstraction away.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, this was an incredible coincidence. Truly just a coincidence, we swear. that is something that you all will hear, and just wanted to mention that straight up off the bat.
Yeah. I guess there was the question about like hiatus. What, like, do we want to get into programming stuff a little bit?
Oh yes, we should mention that it was asked whether we're approaching the end of book 2 and what that potentially means in terms of subsequent hiatus. So I will say right now, chapter 9, which is upcoming, is not the last chapter of book 2. At the moment, these things may change as we write it, but chapter 10 is intended to be the conclusion to book 2, just as book 1 had 10 chapters, I believe. Book 2 is going to end up with 10 chapters. Chapter 10 is likely going to be a longer one.
Yeah.
There was some thought of having it being as many as 6 or 7, but I don't want to commit to that.
Yeah.
It is certainly going to be 5. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one.
It could be 6. So if you're worried about a major hiatus, you've got chapters 9 and 10 before that comes up.
Yeah. And I think, so as of when you're hearing this, if you're watching live on YouTube, this coming Sunday we have 2 minisodes coming out. Then the cleaned up audio from this will go up 2 weeks later. And then I think we're going to try to have a little more bonus content in November. Yes. Then we're going to probably take December off for the holidays. And then we'll hit the ground running in January with Book 2, Chapter 9, which is a 5-parter. So we have content through to May 2023 already done.
And while we don't want to overpromise anything yet, the intention is to keep Chapter 10 ready to go shortly thereafter. Yeah. Likely the similar sort of thing. We'll have, a month of Ask episodes, perhaps some minisodes or more bonus content in between, but we're not, knock on wood, not expecting a long break between 9 and 10. After 10, I think that gets to be a little too far into the future for us to make some tremendous promises at the moment. I think it's likely that we'll have some sort of main plot break, whether that's just a full hiatus, if it's filled by minisodes, if anything else happens in between, interviews or whatnot, we will see at that time.
Yeah. But that'll be end of 2023, which will also bring us to our 10-year anniversary of making the show.
Yeah. End of 2023, possibly even into 2024, which who can even conceive of the world existing at that point? Yeah. So we can promise you we're good through the end of book 2. After that, we'll see what happens. Chad has asked if we're still planning on 5 books. I believe
I just started sweating.
I believe we initially said 4, if I'm not mistaken. And whether we're still committed to that, we'll see how the plot goes in book 3. We have, as we mentioned before, very rough, broad strokes plans for where the plot will go. But in terms of how long it takes to get there, we leave that until we actually start writing that. So, for example, just to reveal a little bit more of the background, we intended for book 2 to be 6 to 7 chapters. And we got to writing chapter 6 and realized we can't wrap this all up. We'll sort of transition in 6 and wrap it up in 7. And we got to 7 and we said, okay, this is not going to happen. Let's make it 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And then that quickly became 10. So how many books it takes to reach a satisfying conclusion to the story, we'll see. I don't think we'll be satisfied with the story ending at the end of book 2. I can say that fairly confidently, but we'll see where the plot takes us, basically. Is that a fair answer, Christian?
Yeah, I think so.
And I will say one of the things that I feel like many people, us included, learned during the few years of very dramatic isolation during the worst of the COVID times is the importance of preparing the show in a way that is compatible with our respective mental healths, and that, you know, we need to, you know, part of, as you all likely know, we've now switched to this one a month system instead of our previous 2 or perhaps even 3 a month. And so far, this has gotten us through this year. This has actually been the most consistent run of episodes I believe we've ever had.
Yeah.
It feels very slow, but it has allowed us to make things more consistently. And I say this to say we now see the importance of, you know, if we reach the end of book 2 and we need to take a hiatus in order to make book 3 the best it can be, we're now less afraid of doing so. So again, there may be a hiatus coming forward, but it will be in the interest of making things sustainable long term. Yeah. I will say, though, just to mention this, it seems as though, just some speaking anecdotally with some folks, when we returned at the beginning of this year, some folks' podcast feeds might not have picked us back up. So if you happen to know anyone who is no longer getting the updates, either let us know or just let them know that we're back. I don't know if it's an algorithm thing or something that burned us, but
yeah. We're also trying to figure out why all of our episodes are out of order on Spotify, but we're like a couple degrees removed from that, so our power there is limited, unfortunately.
But we are working on that, and if anyone has any thoughts, please feel free to reach out on that. I will. The chat has circled back around. The chat noticed my cat walking through the background. I would have grabbed one of them, but they seem to both be asleep now. I don't want to bother them, but we did have a brief cat cam.
And now we're on to what dragons taste like, which is probably a good cue to wrap up.
I mean, they're it's an interesting question, but yeah, I think maybe that's a good point to wrap up on. They had also asked briefly about whether the science of our magic system allows for the creation of magical atom bombs, which also might be a little depressing way to end the stream at the moment.
Yeah.
But with that, let's not go too deep into consuming the sentient dragon species flesh.
Yeah.
But Christian, would you like to do any shout outs before we wrap up finally?
I've got like a bunch this time. So let me try to keep them all in mind. So Ian, our narrator, his production company is producing an audio drama anthology series that's going to be dropping soon, and they've just started a Patreon. So if you search for Via Brooklyn on Patreon, you'll find their Patreon page, and that the Via Brooklyn is the name of the company, and the audio drama anthology is called the Iron Anthology. Kat, yes, shout out to the creaky door for saving Yilidic's life. I also I feel very strongly about that. Let's see, what else we got? Shannon Harris. This was actually, if you saw on social media, this Chapter 8 is going to turn out to have been Shannon's last chapter with us. The scheduling doesn't work for her anymore, but she's such a wonderful performer, and we wish her the best. And she is, if you're in the New York area, she is she's one of a major role in a show called Her Portmanteau, which is showing at the George Street Playhouse, and that is running through October 30th. So that's cool. Shout out to Regina Renee Russell, who plays Nia, and the dragon. She just directed her own version of the old Scottish changeling murder ballad, Tam Lin. That is unfortunately done now as of the time you're hearing this, so you can't see it, but shout out and congrats to Regina on that. And lastly, I want to shout out the user Sasmo on Reddit. I will confess that I often search on Reddit just to see if our show is coming up in conversations or how our SEO is doing. And when we're talked about, we usually come up on the subreddits you would expect, r/podcast, r/audio drama, r/fantasy. But Sasmo did go ahead and recommend us as something to listen to on a long drive on the subreddit for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So if there are any union electricians hearing my voice right now as a result of that, shout out to them. And that is somehow all I've got.
I do want to quickly, because you reminded me, also shout out Shannon. Shannon has been tremendous. Working with her has been an incredible treat. She contributed to our writers' rooms extensively. She's, she gave a lot of her time and creativity to our show, and we're very grateful for Shannon.
Yeah, and to put it simply, there are some scenes that we absolutely would not have.
I did just lose my Discord for the moment, so I think that means it's as good a time as any to wrap up.
I think so too.
So thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate, as always, all of your listenership, all of your questions, your commenting. We really appreciate the live chat. This is always a lot of fun. And thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you for the next Ask episode, if not sooner, for some special bonus content.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.